Radhe Radhe, a spiritual good morning to one and all, and happy Bhakti Divas, Happy New Year, the first class for this year 2023 for our continuing Bhagavad Gita study series for chapter 6. Along with me here is Mummy as we present to you a recap video for today's class.
Radhe Radhe everybody, and a very happy new year, happy Bhakti Divas.
So up on the screen coming up, hopefully everyone can see the cover slide of our presentation. We covered chapter 6 verses 40, 41, and 42 today. Of course, prior to that, a quiz first to review the few verses covered in the previous class. So I do encourage everyone to go back and take a look at those questions, learn everything from there and review that material. And now we can get started with recitation for chapter 6 verse 40 before we get into explanation.
Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Partha Naiveha Namutra Vinashastasya Vidyate Nahi Kalyan Krit Kaschid Durgatim Tat Gacchati.
6 verse 40, we'll see the catchphrase. It's superannuation scheme. And as we mentioned in class, superannuation refers to retirement or pension benefits, previously in many different places, but now much more commonly and situated just to Australia and New Zealand. But regardless, it's talking about some kind of assurance or protection in the stage of retirement. Here, we're referring to it as spiritual retirement in the sense of what happens after this life. Sri Krishna, in fact, over here presents to us this guarantee or assurance that with good amount of spiritual effort, there is protection, not just in this world, but the next world as well. We look at the text itself. So again, chapter 6, verse 40, there's an interesting term of endearment used, which is tat. Tat, as we mentioned again in class, here it is referring to Parth as a son or a dear friend from Sri Krishna's perspective. That can also refer to father in different contexts. We mentioned Bhishma Pitamaha, but here again, this is Sri Krishna addressing Arjun as Tat. And he's really saying, Sri Krishna is telling Arjun, you follow the proper means of yoga. We talked about those 23 important verses from chapter 6, and of course, the entire Bhagavad Gita, all that wisdom it has to offer. And with that, there is no destruction in this world or in the next world. So that's a very, very strong sense of security that Sri Krishna reveals to Arjun, as long as one is engaging in sadhana and treading the path correctly towards God realization. We'll next look at chapter 6, verses 41 and 42.
Prapya punya kritam lokan ushitva shashvati samaha shuchi nam shrimatam gehe yoga bhrashto bhijayate athva yoginam eva kule bhavati dhimatam etadhi durlabhataram loke janma yadidrisham.
So yeah, chapter 6, verses 41 and 42 combined in the book. The catchphrase is first for chapter 6, verse 41 as a question, party to piety, referring to the fact that, as we learned shortly, the unsuccessful yogis who cannot, of course, attain yoga in this lifetime, many of them will get to go to these celestial abodes. There's a lot of bhog, a lot of gratification and enjoyment there. So that is a party. And eventually, after many ages, they come back to the earth plane and hopefully proceed more and higher up towards devotion and piety. At the same time, it's also a question for us to ponder about party as in accomplice. How much of an accomplice are you to piety, towards devotion? Something for each of us to think about so that we can determine perhaps what our next steps in our spiritual journeys should be. Chapter 6, verse 42, then also a question, shortcut to sacrosanctity. Again, sacrosanctity referring to things being sacred, that full state of spiritual bliss and beatitude. Shortcut here in the sense that, well, there are certain yogis, the ones who develop dispassion, who do not have to go to the celestial abodes, and they get to return in the next lifetime itself in the earth plane. But is it a shortcut? Again, a question for all of us to think about. Sri Krishna says, such a birth is very difficult to attain in this world. So it does take a lot of spiritual effort and sadhana. So going to the text, again, chapter 6, verses 41 and 42, we've really now seen here Sri Krishna answering one of Arjun's recent and early question about what is the fate of the unsuccessful yogi. We had that in the quiz questions as well. Does such a yogi or does not such a yogi perish like a broken cloud? Please dispel this doubt, Sri Krishna. So here those answers are provided. You put in some level of spiritual effort, you're not successful in this lifetime. Sri Krishna gives you some reward, which is go to the celestial abodes and at least for some time, in fact, for many ages, enjoy that sense of bhog or gratification, because that's really what that soul still did primarily in this lifetime. So you get that opportunity in the celestial abodes, but then it's a time of reckoning as well. One realizes that, well, all this is actually futile. The soul and its yearning for perfection is not satiated. So then Sri Krishna again takes us down the right path and brings us back to the earth plane, and then gives another earth human form lifetime to be able to add to our spiritual activities. And hopefully this time, try to go to that second route, which is the shortcut route, but the very difficult route we mentioned, which is through dispassion. But now, before that, these people who get to return back to earth after the celestial abodes, because of their karmas and good practices, they'll get an opportunity to be in one of two kinds of families. Mummy will explain some words perhaps later, but we have either a pious family or a prosperous family. So in a pious family, one gets opportunities to be attached to devotion from a very, very young age. In a prosperous, materially prosperous family, one doesn't have to struggle from a day-to-day or a financial standpoint. Again, it is God's way of giving us that opportunity and direction to channel our efforts towards spirituality. So then the next one is the situation where yogis are still unsuccessful, but they had made so much progress that they were dispassionate. So they were really, really disconnected from the material world. In that case, as we mentioned, very difficult, very rare to attain that birth, but their so-called shortcut is they get to bypass the celestial abodes and they get to come back in that next lifetime to the earthly plane. And typically, of course, Swamiji tells us it's going to be a great good fortune for such yogis and aspirants. Our family, our place of birth, that's not something that we can decide. But of course, if we are certainly rising above caste, creed, nationality, hatred, and everything is channeled towards love and devotion towards God, then that keeps adding to our spiritual merits and gives us that opportunity to jump from spiritual platform to platform and eventually to yoga, which is God realization. So, Mummy, we'll pass it to you and listen about any important words to add to our dictionary and any other comments you would like to make.
Yeah, thank you, Gagan. And from verse 40, let's look at the word Kalyan Krit. Kalyan Krit means the yogi or one who strives for God realization. And of course, that is the most important thing for all of us, that we have to move on the path of spirituality, and the yearning of our soul is to meet God. So we have to learn to strive for God realization. Then in this only, 40 only, there is another good word, that is Durgatim. Durgatim means evil destination. So in this verse, Krishna clearly tells that the doer of good never comes to grief. That means if somebody does good, that person will not go to evil destination. Only good will happen to that person. Now, verse number 41, let's look at the word Punya Kritam. Punya Kritam. That means of the virtuous. And another good word here is Shuchinam. Shuchinam is of the pious. We'll connect later after telling the words from 42. Verse 42, the important word is Dhimatam. Dhimatam means of the wise, those wise people. Durlabhat, next word is Durlabhataram. Durlabhataram means very rare. So basically, as Gagan explained, it is very rare, because Arjun has asked this question, what happens to the unsuccessful yogi? And Krishna has clearly answered here that whatever you do good in this lifetime, that will taken to your next lifetime. It will not be lost. So continue on the path of God realization. Continue doing your spirituality. It will take you many, many lifetimes to attain God realization, but nothing will go waste. And based on your karma, based on your good deeds, based on your prayers, you will get a birth in the next lifetime accordingly. If those who are very much into the Karma Kand activities of the Vedas and who are always doing those pompous ritualistic ceremonies to attain many benefits, they are given benefits. So that is why they are sent to celestial abodes, to Swarg, and God gives them a big opportunity to enjoy as much as possible. But of course, the soul is not happy. Soul is not satiated with all that bhog. So in the end, again, you come back to this world in human form. And now those yogis who have done lots of spirituality in the present lifetime, they are given birth according to the karma, either in a very pious family or in a very prosperous family. Both places where you don't have to worry about day-to-day needs, and you can spend more time in spirituality. Also, those who have gone lots towards this passion, they are given birth in a family which is very, very pious and prosperous both, and where the child from the beginning is trained for spirituality. So parents inculcate loads of wisdom in the child from the very beginning, and the child doesn't face any opposition in going on the path of spirituality. So here we see that Krishna is giving us clear-cut solutions of how to move on in our life. This Bhagavad Gita, this wisdom and knowledge is teaching us to have trust and faith in God and don't have any doubts, because we are shown the clear-cut path for our evolution. So I hope that helps to understand. Over to you, Gagan.
Yes, and final comments I'll make just as a reminder, connections we have provided to chapter 2. So chapter 2, verses 40. So for chapter 6, verse 40, connection to chapter 2, verse 40 as a coincidence, where Sri Krishna had perhaps first alluded to this, that with a little bit of effort, using Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of intellect, all those proper means and that right state of consciousness, then great loss, great danger can be averted. And that danger, or what can be averted, is, where you're going to end up. Would it not be a human life? So there's those 8.4 million species we had talked about. To be able to avoid the danger of being in a different form, one needs to put in a little bit of spiritual effort. And also, in fact, chapter 2, verse 44, same thing. We had talked briefly about the fact that Bhog was mentioned there, Bhog and Aishwarya. So again, that is, we made that connection in the context of the celestial abodes. So encourage everybody to go back and look at those verses as well and read their commentaries. So with that, we look forward to meeting you next week. Of course, it's going to be Saturday, 14th January, 2023 for this same Bhagavad Gita study class. And in fact, after that, time is to be announced, but shortly after next week's class finishes, we really look forward to having everybody in the Jagat Gurutam Divas celebrations. A lot of fun and interactive activities that some of us will be hosting, and really to commemorate the accomplishments, the achievements and titles that were offered, given and bestowed to Sri Maharaj Ji way back in 1957 as Jagat Gurutam, or as we also saw in the quiz question, Nikhil Darshan Samanvacharya. So that is again shortly after next week's class, Saturday, 14th January 2023. Hope to see you in both the places. Prior to that, of course, Thursday, Mummy, that'll be 12th January.
Thursday evening, Dallas time, and that is 7 p.m. CST. We have our Bhagavad Gita recitation session, and that is early morning, 6:30 a.m. the next day for people in India. Am I right, Gagan?
Yes, that is correct. Yep. So that'll be Thursday, January 12th, 2023 in the US, and it's going to be Friday, 13th January 2023 in India. Yep.
6:30 a.m. for India and 7 p.m. Thursday for US time, right?
Correct.
So with that, I hope it helps to explain everything, and we request you to go over the recap videos so that you are all well prepared for the quiz in the next session. That is just the revision and reinforcement of what we learned in today's session. With that, we take your leave. Thank you. Radhe Radhe.
Yep. Thank you so much, everyone. Radhe Radhe.